Thank you. Okay, continuing where we left off, so the next portion of the PowerPoint goes into liberalism in depth. We're going to expand on the idea, look at how it came to be. The outline for this next section is looking into the ideas of John Locke, Adam Smith, John Stuart Mill, various other philosophers, and examining their impact their ideas had on 19th century thought. Okay. So the basics of classical liberalism is it develops in the 19th century, so the 1800s, and it emphasizes the civil liberties, so freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of expression under the rule of law, and economic freedom. Those are the most important things. Rule of law, economic freedom, and then civil liberties. It's very paramount to liberalism, classical liberalism. So within the economic freedom realm, you have this idea that individuals should be able to pursue their own economic self-interest, and government should stay out of their lives. Okay, so if you want to start a business, the government shouldn't make it difficult for you to do that. They shouldn't tax you heavily. They shouldn't interfere or interrupt with how you spend your money too much, particularly when it comes to tax. Okay. So in Canada, everyone who's over the age of 18 pays taxes. The more money you make, the more taxes you have. It is a progressive tax scheme, so it is a bit different, and we don't need to get into that right now. Additionally, this idea of private property, the idea that you can own things and you get to determine what happens to them. You can give them to your children, your family, whoever you want. You can sell them, buy them, you can hoard them, whatever you want. Classical liberalism is based on the idea that humans are reasonable and that they can make rational decisions for themselves. That you're able to think through what you want and for yourself figure out what is best for you and what is worst for you. And that varies. There are other political, philosophical, economic systems that think that, no, we should make that decision for you. Like, you don't know what to do with your money. We do, so we'll spend it for you. But that's not classical liberalism. Classical liberalism says that you are capable of figuring that out for yourself and making those decisions for yourself. And if there is a government in a classical liberal society, it has constitutional limitations, meaning there is a constitution, there's a document that limits what the government can and cannot do. They can't just randomly decide, we don't like you, we're going to take away your rights. Although for many people during the COVID situation, that did happen. Okay, and Canada was blasted on the international front for the way Trudeau's Liberal Party responded to protesters, the Freedom Convoy protests in particular. And freezing people's bank accounts because they go against your political decisions is not smiled upon, internationally. Continue. So looking into the ideas of John Locke, primarily we want to talk about, well, there's three things we want to talk about. Private property, first, is to increase productivity of the land. And within liberalism, there is an idea, there is an emphasis on increasing productivity, increasing usability, and efficiency to an extent, although that came later more so with Adam Smith. But if you take a look outside of the field right now, it's not very productive. Like, what's happening in the field? Nothing. Okay. Now, because it's winter, obviously that's difficult. So to increase the productivity of the track outside, the city of Leduc, they flooded it and they put ice there so people can go ice skating.
Oh, dang.
So they can utilize that space even in winter. What do you think happens to schools after, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock? Do you think that adults come here for night classes and that the gym is being rented out? No, right? The space doesn't get used very well after students leave. And so even our school spaces aren't very productive. But John Locke is trying to emphasize that with private property, we should increase productivity. We should be doing something with the land and making it more efficient, because that can create wealth. And wealth allows civilizations to flourish, meaning if you have money, it's better than not having money. Right? When you have money, you can build roads, you can build rec centers, you can do nice things. When you don't have money, you can't do any of that. So it'd be better for a country, for a nation, to be productive. This second sentence here, allowing the industrious and rational to make the most use of land. What that more or less means is that if you're very efficient and productive, like you're really good at what you do, maybe you farm, and you're really productive on that land, you should be able to make money from that and then be able to buy more land so that you can be productive in more areas. So think about that like as a sports team. If your star player can play the entire game and every night they, if it's basketball, let's say they put up 30 points on the board, which is a lot. Ideally, you want that player to play as often as possible because they're being productive, they're putting points on the board, they're helping your team to win. Okay, same with group projects, like find a partner that's productive, that actually does work. We won't look at those questions. Limited government. So government is there to preserve, so keep, and to enlarge, increase your freedoms. Not to remove them and take them away and interfere with your decision making, because again, within classical liberal thinking, you as an individual are capable of making good choices on your own. You don't need someone to do that for you. You look like you disagree. Maybe when you're under the age of 18, it's hard, but at what point do you think you should be capable and allowed to make your own decisions? What point in your life? Like what age? Some people want that at 16, some people want it at 14, some people at 25, some people, they're just, you ever heard the phrase man-child? It's like a 30, 35-year-old lives in their parents' basement, doesn't take any responsibility. Some people, nothing to be proud of. Some people don't want to make those decisions for themselves, don't want to lead their own lives. Anyways, laws are there to protect us from tyranny and anarchy. Tyranny is when, another system overreaches and they start telling you what you can and can't do. Anarchy is when there's too much chaos. There's no order, no structure. Government should keep us safe from violence and keep us safe from coercion. So you have a government, a court system in place, so somebody can't just hold a gun to your head and make you sign a piece of paper that says, you're going to give them all your money. Anyone ever seen the movie Pain and Gain? Pain and Gain? Yeah. With The Rock and Mark Wahlberg and Anthony Mackie. Yeah. So it's a true story. These three bodybuilders in Miami, they kidnap this guy who's very wealthy and basically torture him and abuse him and get him to sign documents and give phone call testimony saying, hey, I'm transferring all my money to these people. And then when the money runs out, they go find another sucker and do that again until they get caught. Right? Ideally, you have a government in place to protect you from that. So if we have a law that limits our actions, it should only be for the good. So for example, there's a biblical law, very ancient law, thou shalt not kill. Right? That's a very reasonable limitation on your freedom. Okay, limited welfare states, so government should step in to protect people from extreme want. Okay, so for example, can you survive in Canada on $1 a day? No. I don't know how you're going to do that, but right. If you can't afford to pay for your food, your bills, you're homeless, you're making bad decisions, we don't want a lot of people at the bottom of society. So there has to be a bit of a mix and match of how do you deal with that problem? Like how do you stop people from falling through the cracks of society and becoming homeless? That is not the answer. Okay. So a friend of mine actually presented this situation to me the other day. A family friend of hers got was a passenger in a car that like lost control on the highway and ended up rolling, and this guy was injured severely. He can't work anymore. You know, what do you do in that situation? Like, should we just have a bit of a welfare state where we say, hey, you know what? You know what? For your injuries, you can't work, and it wasn't your fault. We'll put you in some subsidized housing, so some cheap housing, so that at least you can live. You can have a certain level of quality of life. Okay. Over there, we got the old, you know, your horse breaks its leg, you take it out back, right? There are many different ways to deal with this problem. Hopefully we can deal with them in a more humane way. Okay. Government is there to preserve your property, so people can't just come by and burn it because they're jealous of you or you're doing really well. Hopefully there's a consequence. Government's there for peace, safety, and public good of the people. I'm just going to keep it going. We're not going to rewatch that video, but again, that video is very foundational for understanding classical liberalism, and the points that are underlined are the main ones, particularly that relate to the course. Your course material talks about that the most. Okay, the other ones are still true, but you know, maybe not, maybe a bit more advanced for social 30. Liberty is a primary political value. You should be free as people. That's what liberalism is about, giving you the freedom to make your own choices, make your own decisions. Individualism is also very necessary. We should look at you as an individual, not just the people that you're sitting around. Right? Like, how would you feel if one kid was talking in the class and everybody got punished? In a classroom setting, that would probably suck. If you're on a team, sometimes it's different. If you play sport, you win together, you lose together. So everybody works hard at practice, depending on the philosophy of the coach. Okay. But ultimately, when it does come to a serious event, you should look at the individual responsible. Just an example from my life in I don't know if it was grade 11 or grade 12 one year, we were at a basketball game. A friend of mine unfortunately decided to steal a wallet that was in the change room of the other school. The situation went from bad to worse and would have gotten terrible if he hadn't come forward, but we were basically looking at not having a team the next year because of this incident.
Why would he do that in the first place?
I don't know, he wasn't thinking straight. If you're wondering what he's doing now in life, he plays for the CFL, so he turned his life around from that event. But, you know, one individual makes a bad decision. Should the entire group be punished? Maybe, maybe not. Number 4 there, rule of law. The legal system should be applied to everyone. It shouldn't be like, hey, you have $1 million, cool. These laws don't apply to you. Now, obviously, you know, if you do have $1 million, you might not think so much about certain fines, certain fees, whatever. I think I saw on the internet someone had mentioned, some wealthy person had mentioned that, oh, totally, you can park in this spot. It just costs $250, right? So the rule of law should apply to everyone.
Did you say if you had $1 million?
Yeah.
Isn't that a song? I'd
Probably.
buy you a car. Buy
me a car.
Well,
awesome.
it's Bare Naked Ladies, right?
Yeah.
Folks, I'm just coming by to tell you a reminder from this morning.
We'll continue a couple more slides here. Some other main aspects of classical liberalism. You have free markets. That's the economic side. People have to be free to make their own financial decisions, buy and sell what they want. Countries should be free to buy and sell from who they want, to be able to sell their resources, to be able to buy other countries' products, services, whatever it is. Okay. Limited government is very essential to classical liberalism. The government should only be there to protect your rights, protect your freedoms, property. They should not be stepping into your life, telling you what you can and cannot do. Okay, within reason, obviously. So, liberalism comes out of feudalism, and we discussed that in the last class or two. but feudalism is essentially related to the society that existed pre-French Revolution. So, and there's a picture later on which will help you better understand. Anyways, you have a relationship between the lords who own the land, the vassals. So the owner of the land is actually the king. The lords are given some of that land. You have vassals, they're in charge of running the land. And then you have peasants who work on the land, who produce food as payment for living on the land. So they're basically growing food to live where they are, to also survive. So they're constantly just worrying about producing enough to survive. And so in a system like that, it's very hard to progress economically. You're always in a state of zero. It's called subsistence farming. Right? So everything you produce, you use to survive. Right? You don't have any net gains. Okay? To understand that concept better is, if you make $75,000 a year, let's say you bring home $50,000 a year, but every year your expenses are about $35,000. You gain $15,000. You could potentially save that, invest it, do whatever you want with it. But if your expenses are $35,000 a year and your earning is $35,000 a year, you're at subsistence, you're at zero. You're not actually gaining anything. So that's what's happening in feudalism. They're not gaining anything. And when that goes on long enough, people get fed up with it. Okay. So as mentioned earlier, the exchange for living on that land was being allowed a certain degree of protection. So the vassal or the lord of that land did have to protect you. They couldn't just let you die. You're growing food and the vassal is growing you. You're their product. Okay. So this system does become corrupted. Rather than the king giving out the land to certain people, the people who had gotten it are transferring it down to their children. So it stays within their family. So the peasantry stays peasants, and the people with land maintain that land. Okay? Hopefully they do a good job of it. The plots in France, the plots of land, so this area was broken down further and further. There's misuse, there's corruption. So systems have a tendency to decay. They get worse over time because people stop running them properly. I was discussing this with my friend as well. Just out of curiosity, in any given field or area of life, any job, what percentage of people do you think are competent, good at their job? Does anyone want to share? Nick? 10 to 25%? So 10 to 25% of people are good at their job. Anyone want to counter that?
Yeah, like 5 to 10.
5 to 10?
If everybody's good, they're going to get paid and the same and shit.
Yeah, so I would agree. I would say it's roughly around 10%. That's my opinion. That 1 out of every 10 people who work in a field are actually good at the field. So one thing I discussed with my friend was that if more people were just good at what they were doing, right? So this misuse we're relating it to, then you wouldn't have systems falling apart. So, I'm not going to have that discussion. Never mind. Last point there, so feudalism provides certain people with privileges over other people. So if you're nobility, if you're a part of the clergy, whatever it is, part of the faith, you have more power and more influence than the peasants. And you can move up and down in life, but the peasants more or less stay there. Okay. I'm gonna move ahead. Okay, here's a good image to help you understand feudalism. At the top you have the king, the next section, and you can see how there's more people at the bottom and less as they go up. You have lords, so these are the nobility. You also have this semi-class here, so knights, people who are given land, they protect people, they maybe have a small army, they will help defend the kingdom if the king asks, and maybe the king gives them some land. And then you have the peasants, so these people live on the land, they're part of the serfs. We'll actually just stop there for today.